Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the Bengal Tiger Recruiting Podcast. I'm Billy Embody, special edition of the pod, joined in person by Charles Power, making his return to the show here at the All-America Bowl. Charles, what's this week like? You were at Under Armour earlier to cap the new year and came over to San Antonio. It's a wild ride.
Yeah, it's a long week for sure. These games kind of overlap a little bit, so it's quick travel, quick turnaround. I think it's 6 days straight of practices, but in that time we've got to see a lot of high-level players, a lot of the country's best prospects, and it has proved highly informative to our evaluations and ultimately our final rankings.
Charles, our National Director of Scouting and Recruiting Rankings, making his return, and we're here to talk about two new commitments, and let's lead off with the one that started things off in the 2025 class this week, as we're recording this at least, and that is five-star running back Harlem Berry. You broke him down on the site for the Bengal Tiger subscribers. What impresses you, though, about him just from the jump?
Yeah, I think his combination of movement skills, vision, and just pure running ability sticks out within the 2025 cycle. And that's a cycle we think is pretty good at running back nationally at this stage. Harlem Berry is just a natural. Like we know his track speed. It's elite. He's a state champion sprinter in the 100 and 200 meters. Ripped off, I think, a 4.4, 4.3 at LSU's camp as a ninth grader. So we know he can really run. But when you flip on the film, it's very functional. This is a guy who changes directions really well. He just kind of floats around the field. It's just an effortless mover, long stride. And I think he's a pure natural running back. He sets up his runs, changes direction, does not slow down when he cuts. And I think he just has a lot of translatable ability and skill set at running back. In addition to being a pass catcher out of the backfield, he's kind of a modern every down back. He needs to continue getting bigger, adding size. I think he's added good size over the past year, but I think that's probably going to be the biggest thing for him, kind of determining his ultimate ceiling as like an every down. Could he be a 20 carry back in college? But he's a guy who can hit home runs, but also can maximize yardage just with his vision and ability to work through space. He's not just a strict speed guy who can take it to the house. He really has a very well-rounded game, in addition to just the dynamic playmaking ability.
LSU signed Caden Durham in the class of 2024. Then they get Harlem Berry. The hope for them is to finish it out with James Simon. But when you look at Berry, what does his commitment mean, being the number one running back, being a guy in Louisiana? What does that mean for LSU's running back room long term?
Yeah, I think it's huge for LSU's running back room. I think when you look at his skill set, I think he's a potential game changer. He will not have to lead the field. I think when you look at the skill talent LSU's assembling in general, I think he's going to be a really dangerous option, kind of as a check down receiver, a guy when you're running hurry up tempo, can really catch defenses off guard. And I think if you consider the skill talent we're going to talk about, on this podcast, I think he's just a great fit. And when you look at LSU's history with running backs in Louisiana, this was I think he committed 10 years ago to the day of Leonard Fournette. Obviously a top target for Frank Wilson. Frank Wilson knows elite running backs in Louisiana. Harlem Berry certainly is that. And I think that running back group in general, pairing him with Caden Durham, who is a straight home run hitter, a guy who has exceptional speed, and when he has an alley and a lane, can take it to the house in the blink of an eye. And if they were able to add a guy like James Simon, I think all their skill sets coalesce really, really well and complement each other. And I think they have the ability to be guys who, play in every down, every setting, and complement each other really well and bring a little bit of different flavor to the table.
And for Harlem Berry, he'll be in the backfield, presumably, with the number one overall prospect that just committed to LSU recently, Bryce Underwood, quarterback out of Michigan. I think during the fall, probably every other week that you text Shea Dixon and myself, just look at this one, look at that one, the arc or the arm strength, the arm talent.
Sure.
I mean, you could probably go on for the whole podcast on Bryce Underwood. What stands out about him then?
I think first off with Bryce Underwood, to start off with the arm. I think he has an exceptional arm talent. This is a guy who can drive the ball downfield, I think better than any current quarterback in high school football. That's 24, 25, and 26 cycles. I think he has, from what I've seen on film, the best arm. And it's exceptional. I think he can push the ball downfield. He can drive the ball downfield, maybe, I think, 60 plus 70 yards in a game. We've seen him do that. We saw him do that as a junior. He can just really his arm opens up every area of the field, and just the ability to rip throws to the hash. Like there was one play, I think it was maybe a early playoff game where he had two defenders in his face, was falling backwards and threw a 25-yard out on a rope. And there's probably maybe 100 people in the world who can make that throw, and most of them are in the NFL. So to see him do that as what maybe like a 16-year-old, I think is just indicative of his talent. I think one thing that's really encouraging about Bryce Underwood is he has room to get better. This is not a case of a overtrained, kind of topped out quarterback. Yeah. I think he has a lot of areas to improve, but the fact he's so good with that upside it makes him kind of a tantalizing prospect as a quarterback. I mean, he's to this point been a pretty easy call as the number one prospect in the country. I mean, obviously, senior year is really important. I think there are areas, like I said, that he can improve on, but just the pure talent is really notable at quarterback. And I think with continued good coaching, put him in the right situation in college, I don't have a lot of doubt he's going to be a really productive, fantastic college football player and a guy who certainly has the physical skill set to be a high draft pick.
You've got Garrett Nussmeier, who's going to enter his first year as a starter. He could be back, could have a great year, could move on, all the things. Mm-hmm. Is Bryce Underwood a guy that needs a little bit of time, like kind of like nurse him along in that first year? And I know whole senior year I've had, but what's kind of your early take there?
Yeah, I think, you know, if he were to get a year, I think that wouldn't hurt. But I think we'll have a better idea of his polish maybe coming in. But he's talented enough, I think, to put, if he is in a good situation, I think he's talented enough to play at least in spurts as a freshman. I think that's one thing we've seen with the transfer portal. It's tougher for true freshman quarterbacks to get on the field. I think you see less and less true freshman starters, especially early in the season. Most of the guys we're seeing kind of get in the mix as true freshmen are later. I think bowl opt-outs, we've seen some of that in the past couple of weeks. But I think his talent is such that where if he's in a good position, I think he could play as a freshman. Would it be ideal or would it always look pretty? I'm not sure, but I think that's the case with almost any true freshman quarterback. Like it's a steep curve, but you know, obviously LSU I think is in a pretty good position with their quarterback room. If you were able to have Garrett Nussmeier for that amount of time, I think that would maybe just ease the transition. But Bryce Underwood's super talented, so great problem to have.
Harlem Berry, Bryce Underwood, DeCorey Moore, let's touch on him for just a second. Yeah. What do you see out of him now that LSU does have the top skill position player at running back, wide receiver, quarterback?
So I think when we saw DeCorey Moore over the summer, he was the most dangerous 2025 receiver. He really struck fear in defenses. I think it was kind of a case of he basically did what he wanted to do, and that carried over to his junior season at Duncanville. You know, he started off that first game that you were at, where he had like 200 plus receiving yards. I think he's a dynamic talent, guy who has outstanding play speed. He's a vertical threat, but also has ball skills. Like he wins at the catch point. It really is a deep play threat, but a guy who can also finish through contact, and I think has translatable skills to really attack every area of the field. So combining those three, I mean, that's the number one quarterback, the number one running back, and the number one receiver in the cycle. I would have to go back and see if how many teams have, if they were to finish that, which I mean, still there's still ways to go. Rankings change, but if they were to finish with those three, that would be probably. I mean, you can't do better than that. That would be a pretty historic skill player haul. I think I mentioned in the past, it kind of is like the LSU's version of the triplets, like the Dallas Cowboys with Troy Aikman, Emmitt Smith, Michael Irvin. It's kind of like that, at least in the recruiting level, and for LSU fans, they would hope the college level. But yeah, exceptional skill talent, and I think if you're an LSU fan and you're looking at that type of skill talent coming to Baton Rouge, that is definitely recruiting on a national championship level of skills. So I think you'd be really excited at like what they've done so far in 2025, and I think it's the fruits of the staff's hard work, the product LSU's put on the field this year with the number one offense in college football, Jane Daniels winning the Heisman, Malik Neighbors winning the Blitnikoff. So I think it's a lot of things coming together to make it work. But yeah, those three guys are exceptional, and I think if you're LSU fan, you need to be ecstatic about the way the 2025 cycle's shaping up.
Malik, just short of the Blitnikoff. But
Oh,
now,
that's right, that's
we
right.
know where Charles Powers' vote, if he had one,
he had my vote for sure.
With LSU,
Right.
those national champions, I know some people just
Jeez.
they didn't.
I forgot it was the whole Twitter thing.
Yeah. LSU fans have been wanting that help on the defensive line, and we go back now to your week at Under Armour after seeing Dominick McKinley. And look, early in the season, we're all talking about, all right, Dominick McKinley, number one player in Louisiana, top-rated defensive lineman, 5-star prospect by On3, and somebody that LSU fans immediately said, I've heard things, not as good. You watched his entire senior tape, and you told us, hey, no, he's still doing what you want to see from a top-flight defensive lineman, and then you saw it on display at Under Armour.
Yeah, I think his week at Under Armour was really promising. He was a top 5 performer for us on the week. He was the top defensive lineman for us on the week, and I think what he showed was very encouraging. It reminded us of why we were so high on Dominick McKinley this time last year when he was coming off of a really good junior year. I think first off, he plays with exceptional understanding of leverage, flexibility. He fires off the ball very low, and he had, to me, the most emphatic one-on-one reps along the defensive line. I mean, they're all over Twitter, but he basically just detonated on offensive linemen. When everything was aligned and he came off the ball hard, he really did what he wanted to do and just completely blew up interior offensive linemen. It made some plays in the game as well. And I think McKinley, kind of like I mentioned with Bryce Underwood, has room to continue getting better. But there's no question his combination of size and length. He's close to 6'5". He looks like he's bigger than 280 now. I would probably maybe put him at like 290, 295. But the combination of that size with his plus links, he got 34 plus inch arms, and just his movement skills, his flexibility, and just the power that he can come off the ball with, and the punch and strike he has, really creates a lot of issues on the interior. So really good showing for him in Orlando, and I think he's coming into LSU with some positive momentum with what he's put on the field.
LSU loses Bakai Wingo to the draft. As of this recording, we don't know what Mason Smith is going to do, but talk about defensive linemen and adjusting to the next level. We see these 5-stars year in, year out, and they just, for the most part, seem to take a little bit of time. It's not like offensive line time, but what are kind of the early expectations for a Dominick McKinley and a Gabe Relaford at LSU?
Yeah, I think ideally you would want those guys to be rotational players starting off, and then have their snap count grow if there's an opportunity there. I think that's something we typically see for these blue chip defensive linemen. But I also wouldn't get super concerned if they don't necessarily play as freshmen in most cases. But I think it definitely takes some time to adjust to. I think when you look at, I did our true freshman All-American teams, and defensive tackle was a tough position to find guys that were true freshman All-Americans. I think we actually see more guys on the edge make plays because they're just a little more in space. But yeah, and I think too, it's one of those deals where I think the cliche is it's harder to play early the closer you are to the ball within the formation. I think that's probably the case with defensive linemen. But I think with those guys, I think you would just want them to come in, and if the opportunity's there, that they could play a role. But I think it's safe from an expectation perspective to not expect too much and maybe be pleasantly surprised if they do make huge impacts. And to touch on Gabriel Relaford, I could see Gabriel Relaford having an impact fairly early, just given his versatility. I think he provides juice off the edge. He's a guy who has a lot of positional flexibility. We haven't ranked as a D lineman, I believe, right now, but I think he's a guy who, when we are doing the final rankings, maybe could be an edge. Like, he's pretty ambiguous position-wise, and I think I've seen him tweet that he thinks he's an edge. But I mean, certainly could be. But
so many defensive linemen.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. There's definitely a gray area, but